Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this episode, my guest is founder of Awareness Strategies Inc. She has run our own series of companies for the last 20 years, and for the last 15 years, she's been helping business leaders, executives to scale and grow their revenues. She's also author of Business Ownership Mindset, the ultimate guide to freedom and self-expression through building a 7-figure business. And she's also a host of Business Ownership Podcast. Now, we had a very interesting discussion around many different topics around business and leadership. She talks about some of the challenges and opportunities that business leaders are dealing with. She also identifies some of the key hurdles business leaders have to overcome in order to scale and grow their companies, and how everything starts from a growth-oriented mindset. As a business leaders, you could have a growth-oriented mindset. You're trying to scale your company, but how about the people around you? And she talks about how to help these people do a quick gap analysis and what can you do as a business leader to train them to bring them in the same level as you are. If you find a value in this conversation, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. Until next time, please welcome Michelle Nedelec. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is someone very special, Michelle Nedelec. Michelle, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, good stuff. Marketing is one of those, the field where we always learning, we always trying to figure out new things. What are your thoughts on what changed for the last couple of years? It looks like we've gone through a lot when it comes to COVID, and what do you see the biggest changes in the last few years?
Awesome. Well, the biggest one is that this internet thing is here to stay, which seems kind of funny. But for about 20 years now, people have been kind of leery of it and waiting for it. And I don't know if you remember, but pre-lockdown, people still wanted to meet in person. They still wanted to do their research and get to know people face to face. And with the lockdown, the mandatory kind of shopping online happened.
Yeah.
And as such, our meetings changed, our marketing changed, everything about how we make promises to other people changed, and how we deliver them on part changed. And I think it's really important to understand how that dynamic works in digital marketing versus analog marketing. And with a lot of the technologies that have come up because of that, things like ChatGPT that nobody can stop talking about. And of course, there's going to be more as time goes on. Because what a lot of people still don't realize is that the time to go to market for a lot of these companies is still getting shorter and shorter and faster. So some of the interesting numbers that have been out is kind of the amount of time it took for companies like Google to get 1 million followers, companies like Amazon to get 1 million followers, YouTube to get 1 million followers. ChatGPT did it in microns what the rest of it took. Okay. So it what used to take years to do in a business after promotion and after launch, then took months, then took days, and it's going to take hours in the future. So it's really something we want to be cognizant of, because it's not just about high-tech companies and where they're going, it's about all businesses and what's happening with them.
So that speed to market is important to every business, right? We all strive for it. So what is driving that speed to market? Is it because we have a lot of channels to communicate, or is it style of communication? So what is driving the speed?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it has to do with if a business can get into the sweet spot of who their ideal client is, what products are they offering those people, and what is the messaging that they're bringing to their clients. If they can get in the middle of that sweet spot, it increases their ability to be able to get there faster, and obviously how they're doing it. But people will find it regardless of the platform, regardless of where it is, and that they're marketing it. Because I think ironically, ChatGPT didn't do it by social marketing. It did it, majority of it was word of mouth.
Mm-hmm. And I think the one item they had on their side was, go give it a try. If you like it, and then you'll see. And people who tried it, they found a great benefit of it. So I think that kind of driven the whole thing. It just word of mouth that anybody who tried it, they find a use of it, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of.
Yeah, they were on their own platforms talking about it. So regardless of whether or not the conversations were happening on Facebook, emails, YouTube, wherever, that wasn't the control or the focus of ChatGPT. It was to get it out to the public as fast and quickly as possible, and it worked.
Mm-hmm. What do you see some of the biggest impact? I know there's a lot, we're still discovering as we go through it, a lot of applications coming from ChatGPT. How about your side of things in marketing? I see a lot of content creations. You could be generated by AI and all that kind of area. So, what do you see some of the biggest impact when it comes to marketing in a business that it's going to make impact on?
Well, I think for small businesses, it's making their lives easier, right? Where somebody used to sit and stare at a blank page, they no longer have to do that. They can just have a conversation with ChatGPT if nothing else, and eventually something intelligent will come out of it, maybe. So it's bringing a new venture there, but I think the biggest impact it's making on our economy is how it's affecting companies like Google and Amazon, and changing the way that they're doing what they're doing and the speed with which they're trying to get to market on new platforms. I think those are going to make the biggest impact. But when it comes to kind of us humans, what we do in our business, I think it's really fun to be able to explore how we can use it in our businesses, and that it's not just about, in case the listeners don't know, a lot of what's been going on with it is writing emails, writing content, course creation, book writing, programming, computer programming applications, like anything where you have language. That's a thing. International languages and translations and things like that. It's also one of the areas because a lot of people can speed up their ability to be able to get that message across.
Mm-hmm. But I see a lot of tools coming out as well, also, indicating that, hey, this was written on a ChatGPT because, nobody wants that content, right? It's auto-generated. You see some of those tools coming in a market where they highlight that, listen, this was generated by ChatGPT. Be careful, before you're sending the content out.
Oh, absolutely. So a lot of the difference is are you using it as a baseline? So to get rid of the blank space on a piece of paper is great, but then you want to read it over. One, you want to make sure that it's in your voice, paramount if you're going to use it for marketing. Two, you want to make sure that it's valid. Obviously, that's kind of paramount. But a lot of times people aren't, they're not doing necessarily research and development through it, although they can. But keep in mind, all it's doing is scraping websites. So unless that content is on a website, on a public website, then that's all the information that you're getting. So it's not ideal for things like research that you want to be able to go into actual books that haven't been put online, and they haven't been put publicly online. Anything that is opinion, it's not going to be there because obviously it's just taking other data. Where it becomes useful though is when you want to know, like, what does the general population feel about blah? Right? Because people's opinions are everywhere, and there are a lot of blog posts, there are a lot of websites, all of that kind of information will go on it. So what a lot of the marketers are looking at doing is going, hey, can you write me a simple blog post about, and they'll come up with something and say, the color yellow in marketing and the impact it has. Like, that's not secret information. It's just giving them an idea of what to write, and then going, okay, now what's my opinion on how this works? And then giving it some actual content. So again, it's just getting rid of the blank paper and giving a foundation to start somewhere so that it makes it easier to be able to write things out. Always fact check.
The creativity
and creativity is far more important than just something.
That's
right?
what I was going to say. You can't take, you can't do with the ChatGPT, the creativity, the marketers known to bring that to the market, that you can create. You need to put that human, aspect of it is still be creative.
It's still always there. And we even recognize this in things like autoresponders or bots, right? It became obvious that conversation as a root foundation of all things human to human, it has to be original. It has to be unique. You have to look at it as I'm having a conversation with a real person and not just, what do I go blah with my stuff? Anybody that goes blah with their stuff is not communicating with somebody else. They're just in active desperation trying to get that idea out. And there's a time and a place for that always. Like when somebody's new and they're little and they're just kind of learning how to talk, right? You get a 5-year-old in front of you and they're like, they're going to do that. And it's kind of cute. But when it happens all the time and it's incessant, it's kind of not cute anymore. And the same thing happens with marketing is we can try something, but we have to stop when it's not working. We're not 5 years old, we're adults.
Yeah.
So if we've tried something and it's not giving us the response that we're looking for from our audience, it's up to us to change that. And a lot of it too becomes cultural, which we're not used to yet, which I find particularly humorous, is that we're in an international world now with a lot of different cultures and a lot of different ways of communicating. And that may seem like a no-brainer. It's like, oh yeah, but we're doing business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, and we're doing business culturally. So how somebody would engage in a business conversation in America is going to be different than they would in the UK versus, any other country. Like pick two countries, they're going to do it differently. And I think it's important to understand that, as well as then how do we bypass the language barrier of it's not necessarily their first language. And second of all, that it's a automated response, not somebody unique going, hey, this is what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So all sorts of things to consider.
No, definitely. That's why I like this YouTube discussions or podcast discussions, because they're not, scripted, where you just you just having a discussion. It could go in any direction because there's two humans communicating back and forth, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, perfect. Interesting. So you mentioned something about the culture. You got to be sensitive to, whether it's different country, the culture, how they operate a business. That same thing happens in a company as well. The company culture is also different as well, right? So you got to be mindful how you're communicating to each company. If it's a manufacturing company, you want to communicate differently. If it's a, financial industry, you got to communicate. So people who have built, there's definitely some lessons to learn from ChatGPT or AI, whatever, technology are we referring to. So business leaders who are listening, who are watching, if they want to build a business strategy or trying to tweak their business strategy, what are some of the lessons to learn? I think speed of the market, as you mentioned, we already talked about it. So some of those items they can take and incorporate that into the business strategy, whatever they're trying to build, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it comes back to the foundations. Is they have to understand that the fundamental difference between analog marketing is, so analog or traditional marketing, like a billboard, a magazine, something you can touch and feel, is you can put out a blanket messaging to it and people will respond to it. Whereas online, it has to target that individual. So one of the examples I use, if somebody runs a convenience store, they can put a sign outside on the sidewalk that says convenience store. And people look at it and go, oh, how convenient. I will walk in.
Yeah.
We'll go shop at the store. It's like, that was a very general message, but it hits everybody walking by. Yeah. Whereas if you were to market that same store online, you can't say, hey, we have a convenience store, because everything online is convenient. So that becomes redundant and becomes a useless message that everybody ignores. Whereas if you're marketing on Google Maps and you say milk near you, right? That's very targeted to somebody, or baby milk near you is even more targeted. And it's being able to understand who's your ideal client, who's going to be the person walking by there. Are there a lot of moms in the area, or is it a lot of, is it a higher income kind of neighborhood? Who's going to be walking around? Who's going to be driving around? Who's going to be looking for you on their phone? Mm-hmm. And it's not uncommon now to see, 15-year-olds walking down the street, looking at their phone more than they're looking at the sign that they're tripping over. So you want to make sure that digital marketing is actually targeting the individuals that you want to come into the store, which is a totally different message. One's very specific, one can be very generalized.
Mm-hmm. And on a digital side, you got a lot of data available to your fingertips as well, right? So you have access to a lot of data as well. You can tailor that approach and target that specific audience instead of just general approach as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the fun things that was really popular a while ago, and it's not as popular, but it's still a really good one, is being able to target people as they come into, say I have the convenience store, say I offer free Wi-Fi to people that are coming near the store. I can actually send out memos to people saying, hey, if you live nearby, we have a special on milk, and type in your code, and they can just go enter my code with one button. It automatically does it and goes, hey, you get 50% off or whatever off of milk today. So come on in. And that specificness of not only are you I know you live in the area. I know you come by here often. I know you do all these things because of the software that we have in place to be able to target that, which is very different than somebody just driving by, which is different than somebody going online and searching for a convenience store near them.
Mm-hmm. So it's, it comes down to how you communicate with the people, connect with the people, right? So did that some of that change? I know during the COVID, there were so many messages around the healthcare and they needed to be, right? So people aware of that, what's going on. Did that change some of the communication style or a communication approach in a marketing when it comes to communicating with the people or connecting with the audience of their site?
Absolutely. And I laugh hysterically because there's the mainstream conversation about that, and then there's a peripheral conversation about that. So the mainstream conversation is that your messaging becomes more general, less generalized, more specific towards your audience and your consumer. And the peripheral conversation around that is, and you want to make sure you don't get banned on social media sites. So you have to be able to target your conversation a little differently. An example of that is a client that we were working with works with diabetes and clients' insulin, their body insulin. But because insulin is also a trademarked pharmaceutical, it could not be used in the same way because trademarks are treated very differently on social media and what you can say and what you can't say about them. So even though it's the same term for two different things, it couldn't be used in advertising and things like that. So that changes the way you say your actual messaging and what you're getting across, as well as the bigger picture of what is it that people are really looking for and what's available to them.
Yeah, it definitely changed, a communication style. It's if you got to be mindful how do you communicate, connect with the audience and the messages. We saw so many companies in the US, they just one small little mistake in the marketing and look what happened to those companies, right? So it's just minor mistakes here and there. And then, totally, you just throw a lot of audience, to turn against you. There's so many campaigns running and that brings the companies down. You saw large companies bring it. How many case studies out there where the $1 billion companies have gone down because they just set up wrong marketing message.
Right. Well, and I kind of laugh in that I have a deeper empathy and sympathy for the marketers of the 1960s. So 60s and 70s, there was a lot of cultural shifts going on and changes had to happen. And the way that we communicated with each other changed dramatically. And it was very difficult for a lot of people at that time that thought that the world would just carry on the way it always had. Mm-hmm. And today, the same thing is happening. And a lot of people that are holding on to kind of, I can call it their traditions, although that's really a bad word for it, but just the way they're used to dealing with things has to change. And for a lot of people, it becomes uncomfortable. But when you realize that it's just a change in the way that we associate with each other, it's just a change in the way that we communicate, that if you're open to those ideas of what if it were easier, what if it were faster, what if it were kind of more effective in getting your message across, saying it this way, then in fact, what we're doing is eliminating 80% of what didn't work anyways and getting into kind of a faster, easier flow of communication. So I sympathize with them deeply. I understand it. And with our internationalness coming along, I think it's not only pertinent to the conversation that's going on in the US exactly, it's also a conversation that needs to go on internationally because of the cultural differences. There's a lot of different ways of saying things, and it can come down to as simple as saying hello, hi, how are you? Mm-hmm. And then getting into business, as opposed to, hey, what do you have for lunch today? Did you like it? Do you want to have something different tomorrow? Like it's, that can be a little startling to some people and they don't realize it. And then, you get into all the rest of it. Now, the real challenge comes into how do you hyper-personalize a message without offending somebody that you're targeting them in your message? And that has become the real finesse point of a lot of messaging and marketing, which sounds really funny because you're thinking, well, if I'm selling baby milk to moms, you think, well, of course I am. Like, who else am I going to sell it to? And it's like, well, stay-at-home dads, stay-at-home parents. To, how do you narrow down that message to that individual without offending them, and being able to say, like, I just want to make sure that your kid has milk.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how to say it. I really want to. And I think a lot of it comes down to us being patient with marketers as they catch up to us. And, marketers will eventually go, we're selling baby milk or infant's milk or something like that, that is more precise and more telling of what we're actually selling and working with. So it's a finesse conversation for sure.
It's a fine line between being creative, because you have to challenge the status quo to get attention, because you want to get eyeballs, right? You want to get attention, and at the same time not being offensive to somebody, some segment. So it's a fine line between, you got to dance around between those three, right? So you want to be creative, you want to be out of the box, you want to get attention, because without that you won't get attention. And at the same time, once you get attention, you don't want to get the wrong attention, right? and that will get you in trouble. I mean, one of the examples, we can look at how much money Bud Light lost recently with the. So I don't know if you think of that was a mistake, or that, whatever the take was they wanted to take, but they did get attention, but they lost a lot of money.
Right. So once upon a time, they used to say all attention is good attention, which is no longer true.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to get wrong attention.
And part of it is understanding market, because I think the same ad with maybe Bud Lime might have gone over a little better. And to me, it's not about charging into something and saying, hey, we're all this. And it's like, no, you're not actually.
Yeah.
We don't care. We know what Bud is. We don't care. We like the horses. We like the dogs. This is cute. And, people either drink Bud or they don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big Bud fan, but I do like the horses and the dogs. And so I kind of don't care, in that it's not my product. It's not my service. It's not my issue. Whereas I think if they wanted to do it as an inclusivity thing, it might have made a lot more sense to go, hey, this is an audience we want to appeal to. Do you drink Bud?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, it's like, okay, so
stay away from it.
Why not? And it's not. So for example, Coca-Cola goes into Africa. They didn't have Coca-Cola at one point. It wasn't that they weren't serving an African audience before. It's just they didn't deliver to Africa. That was the thing. And had they done it in the same way that they marketed it in America, it would have bombed.
Yeah.
But it didn't bomb because they went in and said, what do you need? And they said, they went in with their stuff, their chairs, their signs, their whatevers. And people didn't necessarily buy the Coke, but they kept the chairs and they kept the umbrellas and they kept all the things that they needed, because they needed chairs, they needed walls, they needed the necessities of running a business. And Coke just had that as part of their graph. It was like, oh, here, sell our stuff and we'll give you all the stuff. They kept the stuff. And as people were walking by, driving by, whatever, they would see the Coke and go, well, what is that? And then they started selling it. Yeah. So it became, it was an accidental benefit of marketing in that they were delivering what people wanted, and then people wanted the product. And I think if Bud had taken the same approach to it, they would have had a much more open reception to it.
Yeah, Coke, I remember I watching a case study. They installed clean water station, but every time they given out those chairs, they were installing clean water stations, right? So where people can come and get a clean water. But the advertisement on those water tanks was Coca-Cola, right? So definitely, they helped people out with the clean water because they wanted clean water, but they pushed advertisements through the those clean water stations or the chairs, as you mentioned. Very smart marketing, but that's how you connect with the people. Once you give them something what they need, they definitely come back for the products as well.
Right. And nobody in America resented that Coke was now in Africa.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. It was like, go ahead, do what you got to do. And I think Bud could have had the same approach. I don't think that they had the backlash because of the market that they were going after. I think they had the backlash because of the way they went after the market. And it was people just going like, clearly you're not in touch anymore and you don't know what you're doing. So Like, I don't know if I can trust you as a business. I don't think they were making it as a, we'll call it a political statement. I think it was a lack of trust in their direction as a business, which a lot of people are overlooking, going, oh no, it was just a gay rights thing. And it's like, no, no, I don't think that was it for the majority at all. I don't think a lot of Bud drinkers are shareholders. I think a lot of Bud drinkers drink Bud, which is totally different than being shareholders.
Exactly. So, but talking about business leaders, they're building a strategy. At the time, now almost, we're going to second quarter of 2023. They got to scale up those strategy, go back to, generating revenue, scaling businesses. Where you see some of the challenges when people trying to build a strategies, Michelle, they're trying to execute a strategy. What are some of the areas where they struggle with when they go after building new strategies to get the products out?
Great question. Well, one of the markets that we're focused on is the kind of $5 to $20 million businesses, because those businesses are still, what we find is that they still have what we call Frankenware in place. So they've taken a little bit of software here, a little bit of software there, a little bit here. They've asked their frontline workers, like, what do you guys like to use? What do you think we should use? Great. You guys like using this? This is the software we're going to use. And they're not taking into account the business systems and operational side of things and the integration of data and how software works together. And in that market, I think there's a huge need for people that have the IT and the business competence to be able to go in and help them to restructure things so that they work more effectively as a business and as a team, and to be able to use their human resources to the best of their abilities. Because a lot of companies are still thinking that the software will take over the human resources. And that's not its job. Its job is there to augment the human resources and to let humans do the things that they do well. Humans are spontaneous, they're creative, they're fun-loving, they're doing all of the messy work in a business, whereas the software should do all of the repetitive, monotonous, automated things that have to happen over and over again and have to happen precisely. So when we take those jobs away from humans and put it into computers and let humans be messy and creative and fun-loving and do all the things that we do well, then you have a business that is more streamlined and can work more effectively. And that will allow that kind of struggling phase of business to be able to grow and escalate. And the offshoot, I think, will be better, more productive systems that the smaller companies or the startups can look at and go, oh, that's how you do it. Great. Because what they're doing right now is just kind of listening to the marketing and going, oh, that's what Jeff's using. I'll go use that because I heard this thing somewhere. And that's a terrible way to operate their businesses. So being able to use technology for its job and to have the oversight of somebody that's experienced to be able to look at it and go, yes, you're doing it right. This is great. And here's how you're going to scale your business because of it is paramount.
Most business leaders I work with, Michelle, we don't come from a technical background. Definitely I run a technical business. Most of them, my colleagues, they don't come from technical backgrounds. They don't, understanding software to the core where they can make a decision. Hey, how do I best use? How do I train my people for it? How do I best use of it? What can I do in a business? You need to know, you need to have insights into, technology in a depth so you can use the tool to the best of your advantage and be competitive in a business, right? So how do they go about it? How do you help them? I think that's one of the biggest challenge, because that's not their a main skill set. We all come from trade background. If as engineers open an engineering company, lawyer open a law firms. So technology is not their core competency. So how do they make a decision? How do they build a strategy?
Well, if we look at something like disc profiling, right? DISC, it shows the percentage of the populations that, some people are quick to make decisions and they like to be in leadership roles. They like to get stuff done. They like to delegate a lot of things. That typically is your entrepreneurial role, people that are in that. And then there's your I's, who are typically very social, like to communicate with other people, talk about feelings and have a real empathy around things. Typically that will come into play in sales and marketing, things like that, where you have the communications. Your S's tend to be your systems oriented people. They love to have things all ordered and functional, typically work really well in operations and streamlining, getting SOPs together, and or all the way down to the administration and getting a business organized.
Yeah.
And then there's this fabulous C group of individuals who are very much the anomaly and the they're a foreign entity to the rest of the disc profiles going, I don't know what those guys do over there, but it's really neat.
Yeah.
And those are, of course, our techies. And they love to think in an analytical way. They can think about things and understand them in a way that the rest of us have to look at something or hear something in order to be able to make sense of it. And those are typically your techs, right? And to your point, everybody else is running businesses, and those guys are sitting in front of a computer going, like, how do we make it run faster, bigger, harder? You really want to be able to get somebody that can speak tech and English to be able to help you to bridge that gap between your business and your functions and what the technology does. Because a lot of people are, like I said earlier, are making their decisions based on the software's marketing, which is fantastic, wonderful. I'm not bashing marketers, but we do tend to focus on the things that we want you to know as opposed to the things that you need to know or don't want to know. And when it comes to software, that's very important. So the techs are going to be focused on what does it actually do? What does it actually integrate with? How does it actually operate on a day-to-day functions? And I think it's hugely important that people are, one, open to having conversations with consultants. And since the lockdown, getting what they call a fractional CIO or fractional IT manager in to come in and just say, hey, I'm looking at getting some new software. What should I be looking for? What should I be looking at? Like, this is what we want to have happen. This is what we want to do. This is how we think it would be easiest to onboard. But and then kind of present it to them and go, I just want your opinion on this. And I think a lot of reasons that people get into a lot of trouble in business is that they put money to solve their problems as opposed to asking questions to solve their problems. If we ask 3 times as many questions as we throw money at a problem, especially when it comes to tech, we can get a lot better answers and a lot better solutions implemented.
Very interesting. That's a great point. So one side, as you mentioned, that definitely business leaders they need help with the understanding technology. They can make a decision. But the other side of this is my colleagues in the technology industry. We know too much about technology, probably, right? So now willing to look at the creative side of it. Where do we get stuck? I know you spend a lot of time. You help a lot of technology-driven companies as well in your portfolio. So what do the technology company get stuck? Because they know the technology very well, they can use the tools very well, but not willing to look at somebody's advice and just because a tool can do something doesn't mean that you don't need help. You still need help from some expertise or creativity and communication side, right? Maybe not a tool, but other side. So, and where you stubborn to sometimes look at, ask for help because because you know the tool, how to use the tool doesn't mean you can do marketing.
In fact, it doesn't mean anything, because if somebody doesn't understand your marketing and what it does, it falls flat, which is why that's kind of an anomaly. And the S's, the I's, and the D's don't understand the C's. And we're going, like, that was interesting marketing, but I have no idea what they're talking about, is often what can happen. So the same principle has to happen is the head of tech companies need to reach out to the marketers or the fractional marketing strategists or things like that and go, okay, how do we present this to our market? Because what techs are looking at, what it does, marketers are looking at, yeah, but what does your audience want in the end? What's the ultimate result? And it's not what it does. It's so for example, if there's a software that makes videos faster, an AI piece of software that can take your ideas, put them together, and you get a new video out of it. That's awesome. But usually the text will describe it in a very techie way as to they're taking the JPEGs and they're amalgamating, and then they're using all sorts of words that normal people, air quotes, don't use. And what a good marketing strategist will do is come in and find out who is your ideal marketer, who's going to buy, who are the majority of people who would buy this, and what is that they're looking to have happen from it. So, and it could be to make their creative ideas happen faster. which the tech guys are going, well, yeah, no kidding. It's like, yeah, and that's going to be your selling feature. It's kind of like going back to a beer commercial one time that said, our beer is cold when the mountains turn blue. And all the beer guys are like, that's got nothing to do with the beer. It's got nothing to do with the taste. It's got nothing to do with anything, but it sold a ton of beer. It's like, okay, yeah, because that's what people want. They want their can to turn blue when it's cold. It's like, sorry.
It just
that's marketing.
Definitely. Very interesting. So people build, strategies, they build plan, what they're going to do. And I see that execution is part where a lot of companies fail. That's where, this is probably the most difficult piece when you're trying to execute a strategy, trying to get a result. What are some of the challenges when it comes to execution of a strategy and where everybody fails when they're trying to execute it?
Well, and one of the funniest ones that I find is fear. Fear gets in the way. So they'll hire a marketing to come in and go, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to tell people that the cans are going to turn blue when they're cold. And all of a sudden it's okay, now I got to put a couple of $1 million towards the production of these cans. I really want to end up with a bunch of cans that just turn like, what am I going to do with this? And if the fear kicks in, they'll go back to, no, we want to talk about the taste of the beer and how it's going to make you feel. And that fear factor at the end, in most cases, is what stops a good idea from happening. And it's kind of unfortunate because the only way to really know when a marketing idea is going to hit or miss is when you put it in front of the audience, which is kind of why I have a lot of empathy for Bud. It's because, you got to put it out there and then you go, oh, that's okay, that didn't work. We're just going to pull that back now and try again. And they did that with a small short video, and you think, oh, okay, well, if they can screw up in a small short video, how much am I screwing up by printing out a whole ton of cans and making that come to realization? So the bane of existence of all entrepreneurs is that we don't know until we try, and once we try, we have gained invaluable information from that attempt. That is the bane of it.
So do you try small pieces, small units and get the feedback first, or you just go full-fledged and just build a strategy and just go with it until, it's successful?
It depends on the entrepreneur. We are huge advocates of start small and work your way up, because a lot of businesses, it really comes down to time or money. Is this balance? You can put a ton of money out into something and experience what happens when you do that. Or you can put out small amounts of money over a consistent period of time and test and see which way things are going. But that requires time, everybody's time and effort. So it really comes down to the business owner and what are their objectives. If it's a SaaS platform, they probably want to get out fast. It's just, we need to get it out to the market and we need to try this and we'll figure it out later and we'll make changes then. If somebody, on the other hand, has a teacup that they're selling, we would probably start smaller and go, okay, do you have a market? Let's test with them. People that know you, like you, trust you, they're going to buy it. We'll figure out their messaging. And then we can take that out to a broader audience of other people that serve tea, and then take that out to a broader audience and start doing ads and things like that. Because the world of advertising can be a bonfire without the marshmallows, where you're just burning money and it's just really not fun.
You definitely, getting feedback is always the safest way to go, I guess, right? So depending on what you're trying to do, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it really does come down to money. And so depending on what you think is safe.
Well, a lot of business leaders who are listening or watching, we all are good at what we do on a trade, but marketing is not our privy. This is not something we expert at. So even we trying to do something in house, there's always a lot of blind spot. That's where we need people like you to not only discover those blind spot and help us get through those blind spot and obstacles to go other side and then scale the businesses. So how do you help businesses? If you walk me through, how do you connect with so what area of the business do you build strategy with them, or do you come in an execution piece? How do you, what point you come into business, Michelle?
Well, we're a little unique, and I say we as in I'm co-founder of my business awareness strategies with my partner in life and business, Brad Mooney, and he has a vast experience on the tech side of things, and my experience is more on the people and marketing side of things. So our objective is to strategize with somebody and go, okay, what do you want to do? Because a lot of businesses really don't want to grow, right? You get a plumber that's really good at plumbing and they're like, I just hate the idea of having 10 trucks out there and having to organize this and having to talk to accountants and all that kind of fun stuff. I really just want to replace, I want to have enough customers coming in that it's like I have a job. And at the end of the day, I'm done and I can go home. That is not our ideal client. Those are fabulous. I do not bash that lifestyle at all. It's a fabulous way to live your life. But we like to deal with the people who are what I call a special kind of crazy that are going, hey, I had this idea. What if I had 10 trucks on the road? And what if I had software that programmed it all?
You want to scale, you want to grow. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And those ones are the fun ones because there's an element there of, I want to figure out what I have to offer the world and how I can help. How can I help new plumbers coming on? How can I help my clients make better decisions when they're hiring plumbers? How do I help my wife, my family, all of those aspects of life? So we want to look at the entrepreneur and their entire lifestyle and their business and its entire lifestyle and going, okay, so how do we market this to the ideal person and deliver it in such a way that it makes it easy for them to be able to buy when they want to buy and easy for you to be able to deliver in a way that makes sense to you. So yeah, we will absolutely want to go in and strategize first, get people asking 3 times more questions than they normally would at least before they start putting money towards the problems. Because it's much easier to think something through and go, oh, do I really want to do that? Like, that sounds like a lot of work. It's like, yes, that's going to be a lot of work. There's no doubt in anybody's mind, this is going to be a lot of work. And if that's what you want, great. And we can make it happen. And it's also going to provide you a lot of freedom and liberty in your life to be able to go and watch your kids play sports on Fridays that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, or whatever the case is.
Very interesting. Yeah. So you have a podcast, Michelle, and I have a podcast. So how big is the personal branding playing a role in building a brands and companies' marketing strategy these days? I know a lot of people. I encourage all of my business, colleagues. Hey, listen, get on a podcast. Put some words out for your business. That's the best thing you can do for business. But I want to see your take on it. How big is a role that plays into building a marketing strategy these days?
Well, I think we are at the precipice where businesses like Tesla have Elon Musk, and they have a personification in their company. We have an idea of who Tesla is because we've heard from Elon.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important for businesses to understand that it's not just people that are on TikTok and going, hey, we know how to, dance and all this kind of stuff. Come follow us. It's not about that. It's about having personality in your business. And what does that mean to you as an individual? So we're starting to realize, I think, as a society, that becoming a business owner is a form of self-actualization, and people want to know who you are in order to know whether or not they want to do business with you and how you do business. So the days, I think, of the CocaColas and the heads of the companies being behind closed doors is gone, and people want to know who's the face of the company and how does that relate to us, which terrifies some people because now they have to get out there. And you don't really have to get out there in video necessarily. As you mentioned, podcasts are a great one to be heard, but not necessarily have to be seen if they don't want to be. Writing blogs is still a great way, in books, to be able to get out those messages out and have a sense of comfort with how your audience perceives you. But there is definitely a huge benefit to having a CEO of a company being able to go out and personify the business and saying, hey, this is what we care about. This is why we care about it. And this is why we're bringing these products out to the market, because that'll allow somebody to go, hey, I might not have been interested in that before, but I'm totally interested in it now and I want to advocate for it.
Very interesting. Yeah, you put personality into our business, right? So, you get the word out, and nobody can speak about your business better than you can, right? So it makes sense for business leaders to get out. So let's
especially
talk
for your small business. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk about your journey. How did you get so good at marketing and word marketing? How do you get involved in helping business leaders on the marketing side?
Awesome. Well, in about 2003, I'm changed from, ironically, doing websites back in the days when you had to program the little timer that went around and we was programming those silly things. Discovered the realm of personal development and went, oh my God, this is phenomenal. Everybody needs to know this. People need to know the laws of nature that govern success, and how when we focus on our successes, success becomes inevitable. Yeah. And how do you kind of break that down? And started working more and more with entrepreneurs and discovering that entrepreneurs have a phenomenal ability to be able to take something from concept to actuality very fast, which makes them super fun for me to work with. So for about 20 years, we were doing that. And through that, helping them to look at the business in a different way, and how do they promote themselves, and how do they get the message out, and who is their ideal client, and how do they, talk about themselves and boost themselves up, and what is it that people want to hear from them. And in about 2015, we figured this internet thing is here to stay. And at that time, we were looking at going online, and I was taking a bunch of courses, and the feedback that we got at that time was that digital marketing is different. You have to be more specific. It's got to be about what you teach, not kind of the generalities. So one way or another, we had to change our messaging. And at about that time, Brad said, I'm done with the big corporates. He had contracts with the Halliburtons, IBMs of the world. We said, we want to help small businesses. So we went into that tech side of things and said, why don't you run the tech and do the tech and help them? I'll do the sales and the marketing and help people with the messaging and how they're getting out there. And then we can have this cohesive unit moving forward. So it's not just tactics, it's actual strategies and implementation to be able to help them move forward. So that's what we decided to do. We've worked with a variety of different markets within that kind of startup to 20 million, let's call them, and found that the ones that are in that kind of 5 to 15 million are phenomenal to work with. They've got just the right amount of experience to know what works, what doesn't work. They're frustrated enough to go, hey, I want to make this simple now. Yeah. I know what making it complicated feels like. I'm not loving that anymore. And how do we make this big? And that to us is kind of the sweet spot of, you are at the right precipice of your ideas, your HR, your, as we call it, your strategies, your systems of support and state of mind have all finally come together into a spot where you can scale that and make something really spectacular happen.
Yeah, and if you got to 5 million, you have a right mindset. You're not afraid to ask for help, right? So you know where to go to get a help, and you have a mindset of you're going to grow.
Yeah,
very interesting. Yeah. So I learned so much from our discussion, Michelle. I'm sure business leaders are watching, they're listening. They took a lot of notes and they learned so much from our discussion as well. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you, Michelle?
Awesome. You can go to awarenessstrategies.com and find me. Can I give them a gift?
Yes, please.
Awesome. So if you go to awarenessstrategies.com/website-audit, we'll give you a $500 report. And basically it will go through your website. So give it about 15, 20 minutes, because it does actually scrape your website, and it goes through kind of the green lights, the yellow lights, and the red lights. So the green lights are everything you're doing right according to the Google gods. Give yourself a pat on the back and go, yay, our people can find us. This is awesome. Yellow lights are where the search engines are slowing down your traffic because they're getting feedback that it's not as good of a search as they want it to be. So there's things that you can improve there. And then red lights are things that you have to change now because they are stopping your traffic. As gorgeous as your site might be, nobody is getting their eyeballs on it because they're stopping it. So you want to make sure that you make those changes. So if you have, $40,000 website, you want to make sure that it's getting in front of some eyes. Go to the website audit and get that report. And you'll also get a 30-minute meeting with me. I'll go over it and translate it for you if you need help with that. And I'll help you strategize with your business.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will include links to both of those sites you mentioned just below the video as well, and your contact information. I learned so much. I'm sure our business leaders who are watching, I would encourage all of them to reach out to you, connect with you, just have a conversation. If you don't want to do a website audit, I would say first do it. Then you can get some better insight. But if you don't want to go through that, just connect with you, reach out for a conversation. Who knows where the conversation can take you. There's always, so much to learn from your, the wealth of wisdom, where we just gone through.
Yep.
Okay.
Search Michelle Nedelec. If the response is in English, it's me.
Okay. Beautiful.
If it's in French, probably not.
Got it. So, hey, I want to acknowledge your time. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I learned so much from you. I'm sure the business leader will reach out to you. They're going to learn so much from you as well. So thank you so much for your time, Michelle.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that. This was fun.
Thank you.